Greetings, everybody. It's Jim. With all the movies that's been coming around now for about World War One, I really wanted to get a game that would be about World War One that I would enjoy. But of course, in my mind, in a lot of gamers' minds, I believe World War One games get a bad rep because it's like, where's the action at? Because we all have heard that the trench warfare, nobody gained any ground, right? So where's the game going to be at, or is it just going to be a game of attrition? Well, I was surprised and not surprised to find out that there is a game out there, and of all things, here's the surprise, in a micro game format that was made by, not surprise, SPI. They did a really good job on this, and thanks to Wargame Blockhead for putting it on his table to get my eyes on it today, I'm going to be going over with you of my review for World War One from SPI. So World War One is a two-player game of 10 turns. Each turn is about 6 months of time within the conflict. Now, the name of the game is, of course, victory points, and there's a number of ways to score. Now, both parties can score by being the last to, on the end turn, having controlled or being the last to pass through a resource center. Okay, and the thing is about passing through or controlling. There is a lot of movement in this game, but at the same time, if you want to really hold something, you just put a unit on it because they are tough to dislodge, and we'll get into that more in a little bit. But the other ways to score is the German player or the Central Powers can actually score by making Russia surrender, by owning about three of the four key cities on the east side of the map here. And they start with, if they can do it by turn one, if they can, I imagine Russia would have to play really sloppy for that to happen. They can get 90 points. And it goes down 10 points a turn, pretty much. Okay, maybe up until the end it goes by fives maybe. But for the most part, it goes down 10 points a turn. Okay, now for the Allies, they will score. I shouldn't say they can. They will have a 75-point lead already because of naval superiority. So they're already getting a boost. And of course, both parties already technically start with a lot of victory points because both sides have resource centers. Now, okay, so I want to make a complete distinction between resource centers and supply chains. The resource centers are the hexes depicted with an axe and a shovel. Okay, that's 5 points, simple enough. Now, the supply chains aren't worth anything victory point wise, but they are critical if you want to win this game. Okay, now I've never played a game that had, and maybe it was just because I just played pretty sloppy or something because I'm learning the rules. You'll see it in my scenario where I'm concentrating so much on one thing. I'm like, oh yeah, these guys can do this, and all of a sudden, just hell breaks loose. It was a lot of fun though. I never had supply chains break so much in my gaming ever. This part of the fun I had with this. The supply chains are these hexes with a circle with it's either filled in like here, or it's not filled in like over here in Sarajevo. All right. Basically, all the units have to be able, during their turn, trace back, and this is at any time, not just at the end of the turn, trace back their units and be able to reach it, assuming they had unlimited movement points, to either one full hex, like here, or two half supply points. All right, of their own countries or their allies. If they don't, their defense is halved, they can't attack, and if it's not taken care of by the end of the turn, they're off the board. Not only off the board, they cannot reconstruct themselves as a unit somewhere else, which is something interesting that I found definitely happens in this game that I've heard in other games, but I've never implemented it, where you disband a unit and then you bring them back up, like almost all the way across the map. I've never actually got to use something like that. I've seen it in some Columbia games, I've seen it in other games, and because there is a limited amount of counters in the game. So losing a unit is actually quite big. So you really don't want them to get destroyed like that by a lack of supply. Part of the beauty of this game is the game rules are only 8 pages long. 75% of which you're already going to be familiar with if you've played any kind of wargaming whatsoever, okay? From zones of control, how to attack, and so forth. Let's take a look at the counters here. There's only 2 stats on the counters. The attack on the left, defense on the right. What about movement points, you might say? Well, the thing is about movement points, it's only 5 movement points for every unit in the game, regardless, because, again, it's a game where it is depicted in 6-month turns, all right? So everybody's going to get to where they need to be, all right? So that's that. Now, let's take a look at the combat results table, because this is actually where things really start to get interesting. All right, now that works on a differential, not an odds table, which simply means if I attack you with an attack strength of 6, you have a defense of 3, that's a difference of 3. You go to the 3 column, and then you roll your die, and then you get your result. Simple enough, barring no modifiers, which are actually quite simple. For the most part, if your defense is in a stronghold, it has a number, and it might give you extra defense points. If you are on a you're defending in a rough patch, which is any gray hex that's on the board, that's an extra 1 point to your defense. Simple enough. All right. But anyway, look at these numbers, and you'll notice 2 things. One, there's 2 numbers on each result. The first number is the attacker's loss, and the one on the right is the defender's loss. And you'll notice that the attacker tends to lose a lot more than the defender, which makes sense for World War I, warfare. Attackers just couldn't gain an inch. It took them forever in just sending waves and waves of people. It was horrifying. So you are really going to lose some. Now the thing is, here's the second thing you might be thinking. It's like, pit loss of points. How does that work? Because on the counters, there's no backside. Okay, there's not an attrition. There's not. You'll see there's no eliminated things, or even anything that says retreat here, even though retreating's a thing. But what do they do about this? What are these points for? Well, let's get into that right now. So hats off to James F. Dunnigan for coming up with this system. I'm not sure if he's really the first person to come up with it, but I wouldn't be surprised. It's an early SPI game. And that is the CRP system along with the combat system itself. But it's combat resource points up here at the top. And you might be thinking, well, isn't that just build points? And it is used as build points, but it's more. See, at the end of the turn, you can use them as build points. You spend 5 points, and you get any unit you want from your country, from that country, and just put it on the board. Limited to the number of counters that are on the board, because there is a limited supply. But what the CRPs are mainly used for is to record losses. Okay, so as we've seen on the CRT, the average loss for combat is about 2 or 3 in attack. Okay, 2 or 3 points of damage. So when a unit takes damage, there's 3 things they can do. They can lose CRPs 95% of the time. That's what they're going to do. 2, retreat. That's the last thing you want to do in this game, especially if you're defending, because when you move as a defender from retreating, the attacker can move in, and if that attacker is resource points rich, they're never moving again, because again, you can, instead of retreating, you can just spend CRP, so you've just lost ground permanently for the rest of the game, pretty much. And the third thing you can do is destroy your unit, and let's say you took an astronomical loss and you lost 6 points, and you don't want to spend the CRPs. You could just say, okay, the unit's gone. Now there's an exception to that makes it a little bit tougher to destroy your unit, and I'll get that in a little bit here. But the whole point is Germany and Austria-Hungary are very resource point rich, and on the Allied side, Russia's very rich, but everybody else is very poor. So at the beginning of the game, Germany is just waylaying on France and Italy, trying to get them to 0 as quickly as possible, so they are forced to retreat. Okay, they can't give them an extra turn to not attack, because every turn they do get more points back. So sooner or later, if they attack right, they will fall. But it's a tough road, and I'll tell you why right now. So it's a couple things to consider when taking a unit off the board and voluntarily destroying it. If you are a CRP poor country, you're not doing this. Basically, if you can't afford the CRPs and you're forced to retreat, you definitely can't afford the CRPs to bring it back in somewhere else, right? And anyway, when it comes to a lot of these countries like France and Italy, where that you'd bring them back is basically where they're already at. So there's no point. It really comes down to this part of the board in the middle where Russia, Germany, and Austria-Hungary are fighting it out, where there's a lot of movement happening. So like Germany up here could easily say, okay, you know what, guys? You got me surrounded. I'm just going to disband this turn, and I'm going to show up somewhere else where my resource centers are at, and just fight closer to the action that where I'm needed. And that's, of course, limited to the number of physical counters in the game, but it's a very good strategy. Now, something else to consider is the right here on the attack phase chart here. I mean, on the turn chart where all the phases are. You'll notice that there's 3 attack phases every turn. Okay? That's important for 2 reasons. One, it gives you a really ebb and flow of the idea that there's a lot of attacks within 6 months. That's 3 attacks that every unit in the game can do on the CRT table. Again, as we've seen, was 2 to 3, resulting in 2 or 3 damage points every attack, which means if you are getting close to somebody, you better prepare to lose maybe 8 or 9 CRPs during that phase, okay? And here's the thing about destroying a unit. You can only destroy a unit voluntarily on the 3rd attack phase. So if you take an astronomical amount of CRP loss in the 1st or 2nd phase, you're taking it or you're retreating. You cannot disband until the end. And that's really what they're meaning, I think, is like disbanding the unit and moving it somewhere else. But basically, yeah, they're forcing you to take some kind of major losses before you can voluntarily lose that unit. Okay, guys, new shirt, new day, new voice. Up until this point, it has taken me 4 hours to just get to the point where I was at. That's why my voice was really crackling there. By the way, I do appreciate you liking and subscribing. It makes a difference in the algorithm so we get more subscribers to the channel to promote wargaming. So anyway, I'll take a look at the map here. And as I mentioned, every unit gets 5 movement points, right? No matter what the unit. And the beige areas are 1 point. The gray areas are 2 points to move through. And you get an extra bonus point for your defense when you're defending, of course. And the railways, they're not roads, they're rails, and they give you 1/3 of a point to move through. So as we could see here, I was really playing really fast and loose with the game. I'm just trying to learn it and stuff, and there was a lot of mistakes I made early on. Like you could see Austria-Hungary here was actually retreating because they didn't want to take the CRP losses, because I kind of overvalued what they were for all Austria-Hungary and Germany. I'm like, well, so I did a lot of retreating. So like, no, you want them there. They have it to spend. So get in there, get in the fight, make Italy pay. They were only at 12, so I really wanted to get them at 0. I could have easily taken the hits from that. So that was a mistake here. But a big mistake also was really, like with Russia and Germany, it was really, what I was doing was going after the resource points, the hexes with the shovel and the pickaxe, because they're worth 5 victory points. So that's what I was going after, very basic. However, Germany does not have that many physical units, okay, in the game, physical counters, okay, and that's done on purpose. So they're spread out really thin, okay, up here. So there's a lot of maneuvering and anti-maneuvering. So what Germany really wants to do is not defend the resource points as much as it is defend the railways, because as you can see here by Russia, soon after I realized this, woof, I brought them right over here to surround the Austria-Hungary forces, knock them out of supply, which is actually a lot easier than you would think. When I think a lot of games and surrounding them, I think getting right up to them. Again, I don't play a lot of games with supply points. I do play with a lot of games that allow you to flank them and get all kinds of bonuses and eliminate them easier if they can't retreat, but not necessarily supply points. You don't even have to be touching another unit to knock off supply points, even more so if you're playing in games with zones of control. I play a lot of Swords and Sandals games, so Swords and Control, zones of control don't come up too much. So actually, you don't control just one hex; you control three. Well, you actually six, but I mean, horizontally or vertically, it's like three that really matter. So when they got up there, they didn't even have to get right up to the unit to block them off from their supply. So the next few turns, they just got in there, blocked them off. Austria-Hungary couldn't attack. They defended it half, and by the end of the turn, they were eliminated. I didn't even have to really attack them at all if I didn't want to, because I knew they were out of supply and they couldn't fight back. So that was pretty cool there. So what Germany has to do with their limited number of counters that they have is really defend these railways, and they have to give a little ground for the resource points, and just have to give them to the Russians. Now, at the same time, the Germany actually wants to control four of the major cities here in Russia to make them retreat. And that's important because, as you can see here, the VPRS down here is the victory points when Russia surrenders. And it's huge, man. You can't ignore that, because that's like, realistically, it's probably going to be on maybe turn 6, turn 7 when something like that may happen, because they are outgunning the Russian forces, but the Russian forces got so many crypts, resource points, that I don't know how that's going to work. So it's like, okay, you're going to let them swerve over here. Well, we're going to go, if they do get through, Germany might just say, okay, fine, do it. And they'll come over and take all the cities, and it'll be a horse apiece at that point. So I don't know I really can't wait to play this game again. But this is the area where the game's really taking place. This is just a CRP attrition. Now, another thing that's happening is these units also, there's a little tunnelway here between France and Italy that all the units can, the reinforcements that come from the Allies can actually take to get over here, so they can cross over the river, bam, and they can come on over on here, and they're going to come over and do some kind of pincer movement or something like that, for a lack of a better term, and just flank the Austro-Hungaries and knock them off the supply, or get behind the Germans if Russia and Germany is doing some kind of fighting against the railways, right? So that's going to happen in turns. Now, one thing that didn't happen in my game was a lot of this. There is victory points to be had here about invading these areas or getting them into the game. Now, if you just wait, they come into the game naturally. You see the turn record chart down here. Turkey enters on turn 2. Italy enters on turn 3, Bulgaria enters on turn 4, etc., etc. The thing is, they can enter earlier if Germany, or I should say the Central Powers, attack them, but then those victory points go to the other guys. And of course, even the Allies can attack any of these neutral countries, and then they actually give the victory points to the Central Powers. So it's either or. However, I don't know what the benefit is of them. There's no resource points here. There's very few units that they would get. I mean, if you're attacking them, you're actually giving them to the other player. So I'm lost at a reason of why, other than if you know they're going to come in anyway, you might as well attack them and surround them, preemptively, so they're weaker or they get eliminated right away. Not sure. But one thing that does happen is up here in the CRP chart, you can lend your resources to another country. So, and this happens but it only happens a few instances. Germany, I believe, can give to Austria-Hungary, but Austria-Hungary can't give to anybody else, right? So, and there is a hierarchy of who can give to who. All right, so it's not just like you can just spread them around willy-nilly. So that you got to pay attention to that as well. So the replayability in this game is great because it has nothing to do with trying to learn the rules better, because the game is really very simple to learn. It's only 8 pages of rules, and again, 75 to 80% of the concepts you already understand. And even the things that are new, you capture right away. It's just the idea of how to utilize them in the game strategic-wise, where the replayability comes in. So otherwise, you can just fumble through your first game with a friend who's also new to the game, and you'll both fumble, so it's okay. You know, it's like, okay, I know what to do here. Oh, I understand what we're doing there. Oh, we shouldn't be retreating, should we? Ha ha ha. And oh, wow, we both left ourselves wide open. You'll see that when I do my scenario report. I flub on both sides, but it made the game more exciting in a way. But now that I'm going to see how I refine it, I'm going to do some more attacks across the sea and get my men over and stuff like that, and surround others. I mean, it's just going to turn into a different game, right? And I say this with my Starship Trooper videos from Avalon. I know I was flubbing strategies, but it made it more exciting at the same time, and it was just part of the fun. And that's where the replayability comes in. So as long as the replayability doesn't come into the idea of, oh, I didn't understand rules, then that's okay. Now, it's one thing if you make a mistake, like I made a mistake that the rails were a half a point of movement instead of a third a point of movement, which really gave the rails even more significant meaning. So that's on me. Okay, that's not the rules like they're unclear or anything like that. So overall, guys, if you get a chance to get your hands on World War One from SPI, grab it. It's a great little game. For a micro game, it should have been a box set for something more. If I was a marketer, I would definitely do that. I know they've re-implemented it. I don't know if it's the exact same thing or not. I'll look into that. There's a company that they say on Board Game Geek it's been re-implemented by another company. I don't know if it's the same, so I'll check that out. But anyway, I hope you get this game in its original version. In my opinion, it's great as it is, and I'll see you at the scenario report next video.